second. Hello, everybody. Welcome to EduTALK on this week. This week is a very special week because it's Juneteenth on the 19th of this month. It's June and it's Juneteenth and it's a well respected holiday. We call it a holiday or a significant day in American history, especially for African American people and people who were enslaved, human beings who were enslaved, all the way up to the 1860s. And so Juneteenth, we're looking at this on EduTalk, looking at the then and now and the legacy of Juneteenth. It's a very special day on that day, that glorious day in 1865. So we have on EduTalk, you all know what EduTalk is all about already. EduTalk, talk about educational processes. We have with us Dr. Noel Gordon and Dr. Judy Villeneuve-Dyce. And Dr. Noel Gordon is the incoming education Chief of Education in ESI Network, and Dr. Villeneuve Dice is the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer. So let's get this tied down as the focus for our talk. Very short talk this evening. Edu Talk focusing on Juneteenth, a very special moment in American history and African American history as well, because history is history. Dr. Gordon, starting off with you, for people who are unaware, because I don't see a lot of movements around Juneteenth because of the present political climate happening in America. What exactly is this celebration, and where does it come from?
Okay, let me give a little historical perspective. So, following the end of the Civil War, Juneteenth celebrations emerged as a tradition among formerly enslaved individuals and their families. And these celebrations initially took place in Texas, believe it or not, and spread to other states where Black communities resided. And activities during the festivities included religious services, storytelling, singing, games, barbecues, the famous barbecues. A significant tradition was the symbolic act of discarding the garments worn during enslavement in the river. It represented a visual separation from bondage. It experienced a resurgence during the Civil War movements in 1960s. And very quickly, let me mention that the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020 brought national attention to Juneteenth's significance, and the widespread support for recognizing Juneteenth stems from the acknowledgement that it represents America as a nation deeply committed to principles of human freedom and equality. And just let me just end by saying this, that on June 17, 2021, President Joe Biden signed with members of Congress the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act at the White House, and we hope that that prevails.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, so now let's add very good background to Juneteenth to this day. So in other words, another word that we could use to describe Juneteenth is freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom. Judy, what does it mean to you? You know, you grew up in America. You have been around more the culture of American, African American culture, white American culture too. You know, the South and the North, that release of people from bondage in a political way, you know. I don't know about the social issues and so on that still prevail, but what does it mean to you?
Well, I have to say, even as someone who grew up in the United States, I went to majoritively schools with Caucasian people, and Juneteenth wasn't a holiday that was ever mentioned and never included in my education. So I have to say that many, many, many years later, as an adult, after getting a couple of degrees, that I heard about Juneteenth. Honestly, it's really sad how long it takes to get the truth when it comes to history. But what was especially jarring for me about Juneteenth was the deception, right? You know, the Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation took place on January 1st of 1863. But Juneteenth is celebrated because on June 19th, 1865, some 2.5 years later, is when the Union troops finally arrived to enforce in Galveston, Texas, that slavery hadn't been abolished in the United States. It took the federal government 2.5 years to go into Texas, where the African slaves were still being enslaved and abused under this old regime, this old system. So what Juneteenth means for me is that education comes first, right? You have to find whatever way that you can to become informed because, as we always say, ignorance it's not bliss. Ignorance of education is not bliss because there was no celebration in the fact that these people worked 2.5 years longer than they needed to, without pay, in bondage, in deplorable circumstances. So I really do, this being EduTalk being the center of conversations around education, it just really speaks very loudly to the incentives and the political climate that we have now that is bent on trying to make sure that education about our history, about the history of both those who are from African descent as well as European descent, and all of the ones in between, that we need to know, get a full understanding of that education. And right now, politically, schools and different educational institutions are being targeted in order to eliminate that very necessity.
Mhm.
So when I think of Juneteenth, I think it as a strong example of the need for us to be able to not only present continuously through our educational opportunities and institutions what actually took place in our history, more than ever now, than ever before. It's essential for our survival, our being able to thrive, and to being able to advocate for ourselves and the laws that are put in place to protect us.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so we look at the if we want to find out the significance of this day, we need to go back in history and see the journey that policies have taken to actually enact policies and laws, or even just by the social services that are being offered to everybody in this country, or the ones that are not offered to everybody in this country, and the opportunities that are given based on what has happened. I love that you guys started off with the idea to understand what it means and what measures are taken to uphold those standards for everybody. Is it standard for everybody? What do you think, Dr. Gordon, the then and now? So, because Judy alluded to it, some of the things that carry over from, yes, it took a very long time for African Americans, enslaved people, who are aware to become aware of the fact that they were freed, and no, so then it took them that time. It means that somebody was keeping it from them.
Mhm.
And then in this day of our Lord, there are certain measures that are in place for people to get social services, and a lot of people don't know about many things that are benefits to them in the country. What does it look like, that type of freedom and equity that's supposed to be then and supposed to be now?
Let me start by saying, to me, coming from Jamaica, uh, spending 28 years in the public school system and lived here for over 30 years, over 3 decades. To me, Juneteenth represents both a moment of celebration and a call to remembrance. It's a celebration of resilience, freedom, unbreakable spirit of the African Americans who endured the horrors of slavery. But it's also a time to reflect on the unfinished work of justice and equity in our country. And over time, Juneteenth has evolved from a regional commemoration in Texas, and it's been given wide visibility,
Mm-hmm.
but its true significance lies in the community led storytelling, remembrance, and education that continue to shape our understanding of freedom. So it was originally rooted in local activities, grassroots celebration, focus on the community, as I said earlier, with churches and the barbecues. And it was a sacred time for formerly enslaved people whose descendants honor the history of slavery. And I'm glad that we do that, because if you don't know where you're coming from, you won't know where you're going.
Where
But
you're going.
over the decades, especially during the civil rights movement, and again in the early years, it has become a broader cultural and political statement. Yes, I'm going to say political statement. We can relate to that, especially now when they're trying to eliminate, our history.
Mhm.
Today, while cookouts and parades remain central, Juneteenth has also become a day of education, activism, and reflection across many communities beyond Texas. Let me just say, uh, in New Jersey public school system, I don't know what the state is now that they got rid of DEI and curriculum that's centered on minorities, etc. There was what you call the Amistad curriculum, which schools were required to incorporate in their curriculum. And I can tell you that I have interviewed teachers who came into the public school to be history teachers. And I asked them about the Amistad curriculum, and they were totally oblivious of
Mhm.
the Amistad curriculum. I've spoken with social studies teachers who were teaching history for years. I won't say whichever school district, I won't say call school districts names,
Mhm.
but they didn't have a clue. Something that's legislated by the state of New Jersey, and you're supposed to incorporate in the system. So back to what Dr. Mrs. Dr. Dice, Dr. Dice, when she mentioned about her being oblivious of all of the works and the noble things that we did. We have a responsibility. And I want to commend EduTALK for raising this topic here on Juneteenth, because trust me, lack of knowledge is destroying us.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I want Julie to build upon that. Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Um, when you say that you never heard of Juneteenth, and this has you're looking just briefly, 1863, the slaves were freed, enslaved people. It took 2 years to 1865 for it to reach Texas, for the information to reach Texas. That listen, you need to get off this land. You're free. Go and do your own thing. But it requires of people to understand what freedom is, and then to become independent, to fend for yourself. It requires of them to have a mindset to work for yourselves. And a lot of these people, for generations, over 400 years, don't even know to work for themselves because they were born in slavery. And so you look at when I mentioned social services and benefits and so on, were there any support system for these people to actually just try to assimilate in the society, to starting to get property, to work for yourself, to find out how you can build wealth and so on? Were there systems like that in place for them after you free these people, after you tell them that they're free? What does that look like for them? And then compare that to know when you see generations of black people in America, they're still trying to work through the systems, still trying to struggle through a system that might not have been built for them, or still trying to fight against them becoming somebody, still struggling with developing generational wealth because the system might not be be friendly to those people who are downtrodden and segregated and fought against by the system. What does it look like now and then with the systems that are in place for support for African American people?
So, the story of African Americans is one of repeated and consistent resilience. After 1865, that's when African American people really showed what they were made of. Regardless of the fact that the system in general hadn't supported them, they started to be able to vote. They held political office in droves, which is still represented in Washington, D.C. A large majority of African Americans have been in office since that period. And they also built schools. The most successful academia, came out of the schools prior to segregation, and then businesses. And that happened for about 2 years. It's called the Reconstruction period, when Black Americans actually showed what they were made of. They were ready to be out there and be full participants in society. However, it wasn't ready. The country, majoritively white American country, was not ready to see them having that much success and seeing them in so many places, independently working for themselves and getting the success that comes with that. So their efforts were confronted with violent resistance. A lot of discriminatory laws came into effect during that time, in order to systemically roll back all the gains that African Americans had made during that period, right after the abolition of slavery.
Mhm.
So, this is just an example of many, many instances where African Americans have been knocked down and lift themselves up by their bootstraps and knocked down and lift themselves up again. Of course, we have the example of Black Wall Street. That was a community where it was very self-sufficient. The people who had started businesses were being patronized by the people who lived in that community. So the money was circulating. They had a nice, like, kind of semi-economic system, independent of the white American community. And they were doing very well for themselves, owning their own homes. And then, of course, as those of us who may not know, and those of us who do, you had white Americans come in and literally with machine guns shoot all of them down. Fathers, mothers, children, nobody was safe from the wrath, because this level of independent living that African Americans have always been capable of and have, in fact, had opportunities to experience has always been eliminated, right? In violent ways. There was an African American community quite successful, even here in New York in Central Park. And now they decided that they would just move them all out, right? Steamroll their homes and turn that into a space that, for those of us who know, majority of which are surrounded by some of the most wealthy areas that you can find in New York City. So had they been able to keep that land, the generational wealth, it would have skyrocketed for those people. So, yes, despite all of the pushback, and now we're experiencing it again, right, with civil rights at the federal level being obliterated. And of course, it's at the state level, it's also deteriorating as a result of the federal government's decisions. We have a situation where African Americans and people of color in general have to tap into that strength that they've always had, that they will continue to have, to exist despite all of these challenges, because we've done it before, we can do it again.
Mhm. Thank you. Talk to the effect, Dr. Gordon, about advocacy and activism in this day, because we don't want to say, we need to get up and we need to overthrow the government, or we want to go around and create violence and all of that. That's not what we're talking about here. But to have a spirit of advocacy and activism in the sense of Juneteenth and the philosophy and freedom that it brings for equity, on minority groups. What does that look like for us to be an activist, or looking at advocacy?
I would start by mentioning what I think the role of that Juneteenth should play in modern American society, particularly in terms of acknowledging and addressing ongoing racial disparities. First of all, it has to be acknowledged. We can't turn a blind eye and say it doesn't exist. Uh, we have to understand that affirmative action is not about putting unqualified blacks into prominent positions. It's by giving everybody the opportunity to access to that special job. So Juneteenth should serve as as we talk about activism, Juneteenth should serve as both a mirror and a compass. It reminds us of a painful history that still informs many of our social and economic realities today, believe it or not. But it also points us toward the possibility for transformation, right? So by recognizing Juneteenth and by keeping it on the forefront like we're doing through EduTALK, we acknowledge that freedom in America was not granted equally or all at once.
Yeah.
We talked about it 2 years after freedom was given, folks were still in bondage and they didn't know, right? And true equity and equality require intention, action, and accountability. And it should be a catalyst for honest conversations about race. You know, systemic inequities exist, and the work required to create this just society should involve activism, and we should be given an opportunity to address these things without being threatened to be thrown into jail, etc. Juneteenth can be a powerful educational platform, especially if we move beyond surface level celebrations. It offers an entry point into the broader history of Americans,
Mhm.
African Americans, from slavery to emancipation to Reconstruction to Jim Crow to the Civil Rights era to the ongoing struggle for justice. Schools, museums, workplaces, and media can use Juneteenth to elevate Black voices, center authentic narratives, and celebrate the vast contributions of Black Americans to every facet of American life, art, science, politics, and beyond. We
Mm.
have to champion the cause. I think Martin Luther said something in essence that if you stay silent, then you are also a part of the oppressor.
You are a
So
part
let
of
us
the
talk
problem.
about it, and let us be unapologetic about it. Uh, let's talk about our heritage and how we have impacted society and how we should not be displaced.
Yes, yes. Judy mentioned recently the pulling up yourself from your bootstraps, and it was MLK who said, "How can a man pull himself up by his bootstraps when he don't have any boots at all on? You know, you let him loose, and you want him to pull himself up."
Yes.
Yeah, there's a platform that we need to create with activism to add what both of you said, to give people voices, and you have allies on the other side. You know, if even if you don't come or have ancestors who were enslaved, you can be an ally. You can say, listen, injustice to one person is injustice to everybody. You know, if you hurt, I am hurt too, because we're all a part of the human race. We're a part of the human race, regardless of which fictitious race that we were put in these boxes of races. What would you say, Judy, since as being a part of the school system and a mentor for young girls, especially out there, and boys too. What would you say to young people or teachers or educators in general in America who is going through this struggle now? And the struggle is real, to continue to hold firm a space for voices of young Black kids, of developing their confidence, the level that they need to become activists and poets, people who are artists, you know, people who are going in to the educational arena as well, and those who are getting into politics, if they find that, you know, I have this body and this voice that I can offer to other people, what are the things that you would say to them?
Well, I mean, actually, it's the most profound and moving political artwork and music and creativity and solutions have come out of political turmoil. So the fact that we're experiencing what we are in the United States as a collective, right? As American citizens, yes, as African people, but those who are now starting to feel what it's like to be like an African person, right? We have immigrants that are starting to get a taste of what it feels like to be a targeted minority group. I think this is an opportunity to really see and reflect on our commonalities rather than just our differences, to be able to understand repression as something that is against all of us rather than just a select few. I think this is a perfect opportunity to actually see that in action. The divide and conquer has been what has held us back, right? They divide us by color, they divide us by gender, they turn Black men against white women. There's a number of things that are in place in order for us to feel as if, as long as we're safe in our corner, everything is fine. But nobody is safe right now, right? Nobody is safe. And even the people who they believe are being protected by all of this are themselves victim of a system that is really financially based, right? It's
Mhm.
about the economy, beginning and end of the turmoil. It's all about the economy. So I would definitely say read. I recommend to every child, read. You need
Mm.
to start reading because none of this is happening for the first time. This is all happening again and again, generation after generation. Read as much as you can about history. Find those books. There are a lot of them online. People are throwing away books, for goodness sakes. There are books available. Learn about history, see the commonality, recognize what's happening, see how it was solved before so you can participate in the solution now. This is what we have to do. I would tell every child, Black, white, Asian, Chinese, Native American, Hispanic, all of them have been deceived. All of them have been denied the education that they need in order to be able to be informed enough to become productive adult citizens.
Mhm.
That is the very first thing. They say, if you want to hide something from poor people, just put it in a book. Make them wrong. Make them wrong about you. Pick up that book and start. And you can't stop once you see what's been happening, once you start to recognize the similarities and the identical plays that they're making on people,
Mhm.
you will know what to do. You will be able to be a better, more productive participant in the solution for your own future, because we're all going to die out. The young people need to know what to do to save themselves, and we will be the beneficiaries of those students and their evolution. But we need to
Mhm.
help them as well. So
Yeah,
this is what I would tell every child and every adult, because many of us don't know anything either about our history. We
yeah,
all need to start reading now so that
yeah.
we can do something about it.
True, true. Dr. Gordon, what would you tell young people?
Listen, I'm echoing what Dr. Dice just mentioned about education. Listen, education is foundational. It empowers individuals, preserves cultural identity, it equips communities with the tools to challenge injustice. And for Black Americans, access to quality, equitable education has always been a battleground. From segregated schools to curriculum that ignores or distorts Black history, a true liberatory education tells the full story. The full story affirms the dignity of every student. And I'm saying with this emotion because I've seen it. I've seen the opposite. And
Mhm.
it prepares them to engage critically with the world around them. It's one of the most powerful tools we have to dismantle systemic racism and build a more just future. Even though we have some intimidating activities happening right now, we have to educate our youngsters. It starts with recognition and accountability. We must confront the truths of our history, not to assign guilt, but to understand the roots of our current inequities. From
Mhm.
there, real progress requires policy change. Unfortunately, it's going in the opposite direction now. Equitable access to education. Yes, we still, Dr. Dash, we're all in the education field. We still have to champion the cause for equitable education, economic opportunity, criminal justice reform, and I'm going to be finishing out here, but it also requires individual commitment to
Yeah.
listen, to
Yes.
learn, to challenge biases, to stand in solidarity. Building an inclusive society isn't just about correcting the past. That's one. It's not just about correcting the past, it's about creating systems everywhere for everyone, regardless of race, so that everyone will have an opportunity to thrive.
Yes, yes, yes. Well said. To sign us out. Thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Judy Villeneuve-Dyce, the CFO for ESI. and Dr. Noel Gordon, our incoming Chief Academic Officer. Thank you so much. Um, this has been EduTalk, and I hope you learned something about Juneteenth and your part that you can play in this changing time. As as Marcus Garvey once said, "Up, up, you mighty race, achieve what you will." Happy Juneteenth, everybody. Happy Freedom Day. Walk good. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.